Katie, and welcome to another episode of So About That. Imagine taking a trip to another country without ever leaving this country. And I don't mean virtually or anything like that. I mean literally stepping on foreign soil in the United States. So about that, the tip of Florida is about as close as you can get to Cuba without leaving the US. Or is it? What if I told you that you could go to Cuba without a passport, or without ever leaving Tampa? On the corner of East 8th Avenue and North 13th Street in historic Ybor sits this tiny park. You might even miss it if you're not looking close enough. Parque Amigos de Jose Marti, or in English, Friends of Jose Marti Park. The park is fenced off with gates that only open for a few hours during the week. But step through those gates and you're technically standing in another country, Cuba. Plaques with the names of each Cuban province sit on the ground, and the soil comes from those areas too. Roosters and chickens even call the park home. A statue of Jose Julian Marti Perez sits as a centerpiece in the middle of the park. But who was he? Let's take a trip back to the 1800s. To set the scene, the US was on its way to fulfill Manifest Destiny, and part of that included an effort to buy Cuba. At the time, Cuba was under Spanish rule, but the Cubans didn't want this. The people were overly taxed, there was major corruption amongst Spanish leaders, and slavery was a prominent issue. So, in 1868, the gruesome 10 Years' War broke out, and more than 200,000 Cuban lives were lost. In a failed attempt to gain independence, rebels agreed to stop fighting as long as there would be reform, but many of those reforms never even happened. In comes Jose Marti. A poet, journalist, and strong political activist, Marti wrote all kinds of poetry, essays, and articles, all in support of a free Cuba. He admired the US Constitution, applauding the idea of freedom of speech, and at the same time, he also spoke out against imperialism. But he wasn't just a writer. While he spent much of his time in exile outside of Cuba, he was planning a second attempt at freedom, and in 1892, he founded the Cuban Revolutionary Party. Just 3 years later, he returned to Cuba, ready to fight for his country's independence from Spain. However, only a few weeks after arriving, he was killed in battle. And while it was a huge loss for the Revolutionary Party, he lit a fire for the rebels. They pushed forward and continued fighting for several more years until the US intervened in what was the Spanish-American War. A short-lived war, Spain left Cuba in 1898, and the island became the Republic of Cuba in 1902, along with guaranteed protection from the United States. Today, Jose Marti is considered the apostle of Cuban independence for sparking that hope and second chance of becoming a free country. In Ybor specifically, he delivered passionate speeches to Cuban cigar workers, empowering them to support the fight back home. Paulina Pedroso owned the land the park sits on now. Pedroso was a friend of Marti and a female leader of the Cuban Revolution. The land was previously Pedroso's boarding house. Marti stayed here frequently, and Pedroso even helped him recover from an assassination attempt in 1892. The land was donated to Cuba in 1956, 3 years before the Cuban Revolution and rise of Fidel Castro. Despite the tensions between Cuba and the US, that land remained the only Cuban property in the US for decades, until 2015 when the Cuban embassy was opened in Washington, D.C. Today, the park still belongs to Cuba, and the city of Tampa maintains it. It's also managed by Tampa's Cuban American community. It's a constant reminder of Cuba's tenacity for freedom and the Ybor community who helped the country get there. Next time you're in Ybor, take a trip to Cuba, because not only are you stepping into another country, but you're stepping into another time, one where everything was put on the line for freedom. Do you ever have any questions about the Tampa Bay area, or maybe just why things are the way they are? Well, I want to hear from you, so send over your questions. You can email me at mjones@10tampabay.com, or you can find me on Twitter at KatieJonesTV. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment below, and hit that subscribe button, because we have new episodes dropping every week from this series, our Welcome to Florida series, and Jenna's investigative series, What's Brewin', all here on The Deeper Dive.